So, hi, Mark. Hello, nice to
Hi.
see you again.
Hopefully, I'm coming through loud and clear.
You are beautifully. Thank you. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce you for today's event. So I've got your bio here. I know you and I have connected a little bit in the past as well. So just on a personal note, I will say to our audience that Mark is extremely knowledgeable. He brings in all the archaeological wonder and does amazing work in the film space as well. So I'm very excited for your presentation today, Mark.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So I'll give you the official bio. Mark Olly is an author and a filmmaker. Mark has an extensive educational background, which includes archaeology, business, a certificate of ministry, and a diploma of biblical studies. For over 22 years, Mark worked as a professional musician, live DJ, composer, and in music management, founding Angel Heart Music, Unicorn Entertainment's Agency Limited, and Legend Think Limited, which is one of the first multimedia production companies in the world before moving on to pursue a solo career as an international writer, archaeologist, and television presenter. Mark has 9 major books in print, appeared on Carlton Television's The History Detectives, wrote and presented all 3 seasons, 22 episodes of ITV Granada's award nominated Lost Treasures Adventure Archaeology series. Has presented for Sky History Channel, featured on popular US series Ancient Aliens, and many more. Today, Mark is talking to us about blowing the lid off reality towards disclosure. What an exciting topic, Mark.
Hopefully.
Are we going to be mind blown when you blow the lid off this amazing topic?
I don't know. I mean, it's a game of three halves. Hopefully, the talk will work as well because I'm running it on a screen behind me. So that'll be interesting. I'm going to disappear for that. I'm going to sort of wander off that way and then I'll just leave you with it and talk over it. And then I'll
Oh,
come back
cool.
at the
That's
end.
great. Cool.
Yeah. Old school.
Is
Do it
that
old school.
so is the presentation physically
Mm.
behind you? Is that what
Yeah.
you mean?
Yeah. It's here. Yeah. It's on a
Great.
big
All
screen
right.
behind me.
Perfect. That's new.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mark. Take it away.
Okay, here we go then. Let me just disappear off that way, and hopefully you'll get it on the feed. Here we go. There we are. Yeah, there we go. That should be all right. Okay, hopefully you can still hear me. Okay, as it was said in the introduction, I am to some extent aiming to blow the lid off reality a bit with this one. Um, Mainly because I'm starting with the images
Mark.
of, yes.
Sorry, can I interrupt you for 2 seconds? So you've got this thing in the corner of the screen that's kind of like taken up the sort of bottom corner of the thing. I don't know what that is that you've
Oh,
placed in front of the camera. Ah, perfect. Yes, now
is
it's
that better? Okay,
yes,
well, hold
that's
on. For, te
fabulous.
for technical reasons, I will start that again.
Thing.
Hold on. Let me just make sure is that still okay? Yeah, that should be all right. Here we go. Right, now we've got rid of
You're
the,
trying to cover
yeah, I'm just trying to stop the reflections from the laptop.
No,
Uh,
Mark, we still it's covered like that, but when the video plays, we actually don't see the reflection. So you can go ahead and remove it. Let's see. Well, try
oh,
removing that thing. Try removing that thing. Let's see.
you'll see it on the darker side of it, I
I got you.
think.
I got you.
You see what I
All
mean? When
right,
the
yeah, I
darker
guess
images come in, you
let's
can
put it
see
back
it.
up
Yeah,
and let's try
okay.
to make
Try
it
that.
as low as possible.
There you
Can
go.
you go
Try.
lower? That's almost half the screen.
How's that?
That works.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, that'll work for me. Right, okay, we'll start again. It's only me again. This is what happens when you have old technology that won't plug in. Okay, as I was saying, yeah, reality. We're going to start off with looking at the basics of what make up our reality. In this dimension, quite clearly, you're dealing with the basic elements. You're dealing with fire, which is one of them, water, which is another one, earth, which everything's made from, the chemical composition of the planet, and air, of course. Those are your basic 4 elements. So I'm going to sort of bring it in right at the very beginning, and I'm going to say that whatever we're seeing, whatever is happening in our dimension must to some extent be made up of those 4 basic elements. There are actually 5 elements because there's an element of spirituality about it as well. There's spirit. So you've got fire, water, earth, and air, and spirit. So when people put the objection forward that, these alien ships are not really truly alien, that's a false objection, because at the end of the day, they have to function in our dimension and in our reality. They've got to work here, or they're just simply not going to work. You wouldn't be able to see them or experience them or communicate with them, and they wouldn't be able to do that with us either. So I'm aiming to blow the lid off reality by showing you how those interactions can take place, and what's going on behind it. So I think I said in the introduction, this is a game of three halves, game of three parts. And first one, we're going to look at a crash. Let's start off with something that is very, very much a physical interaction with our dimension. Began in January of 1983, and there was a strange debris discovered in a little sleepy village called Llanilla in Wales by a crash recovery team led by Gary Rowe. Now, this I did once before. On the 25th anniversary, I put out a DVD called Europe's Roswell, which is probably a collector's item by now, because that was back in 2008. And the documentary in some detail covered the stuff that was recovered from that crash. But of course, we've moved on a little bit now, because we're 40 years on from the crash, and there are some new pieces of information that are known. After I released that documentary, a lady came forward who was an art student at Aberystwyth Art College, which is in mid Wales. It's on the Welsh coast, facing out into Cardigan Bay. And she said, well, I woke up one morning, she said, I opened the curtains and I saw something that looked very much like a, quote, flying saucer, but lit up like a light coming up out of the sea, out of the ocean in Cardigan Bay. And she said, I was just quick enough to grab my camera and get a photo of it. So like all these apocryphal tales, I said to her, well, look, please send me a copy of the photograph. Now, unfortunately, she never did. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, that was extremely early in January, the first couple of days of January, which ties in very well with the crash, which occurred a little bit further inland in the same January, about a mile and a half outside a sleepy Welsh village called Llanilla. Now, this is where it really starts to become interesting, because nobody heard anything. Nobody saw anything. The farmer went out to tend his fields the night before and they were clear. There was no debris. There was nothing there to see. He gets up the following morning. This is around about the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd of January. And he goes out to discover that 4 of his sheep fields are covered in what he describes as metallic metal sheeting that looked a little bit like tin foil with a few bits of debris mixed in, but no sign of any craft that this might have come off. So it was deduced, if you like, that something had come down in the night or had materialized in the night, struck the top of the nearby copse, the nearby trees, and sliced a great huge 25-foot wide slice out of the top of them, and then burst out of the copse and scattered all of this debris across 4 fields. Now, of course, the first reaction for the farmer was to phone up the local Air Force base and say, this is what's happened. What's going on? Have you lost anything? And then later that day, the police turned up with the Air Force and began to clear the debris. And he also described some guys in suits that were ordering other officials around. So clearly there were 3 categories of people involved in this, which would have been military, police, and men in black, or AN other, as we prefer to know them. Anyway, of course, the beauty of this is that we actually have the debris from the crash, which they got out of the wooded copse. not all of the debris was completely cleared. So for the first time ever in full colour, here we have the photographs and the stills from that documentary from 2008. Gary keeps the debris quite securely locked in a case away from his home location in safe storage because he doesn't want this to be removed in any way, shape, or form. The men in black did come knocking at his door, asking for, quote, their metallic pieces back. And he just basically said, no, tough luck. I've sent them all out as key rings all over the place. There's fragments scattered right across the UK. And if you don't turn up on my front doorstep, I won't tell these people to release the fragments to the press. So they just got back into their unmarked SUVs and drove off. That was the end of that. But like I say, we have these surviving fragments. There were at least 5 fragments in the DVD that we did, and I've got the best 4 of them here in this presentation. So hopefully you're enjoying this, because this is, thankfully, finally, at last, some kind of physical evidence of a UFO, unidentified flying object, or UAP, depending on which generation you're from. So, of course, with it being 40 years, we decided we were going to do the book version of this, Europe's Roswell 40 Years Since Impact. And it gave us an opportunity to revisit the case, which we did. We submitted 5 Freedom of Information requests to the local Air Force bases, Department of Transport, police, and all of those seem to have been passed back to the MOD. And all of the requests from the MOD have so far drawn a blank. They're basically saying, no, we don't know anything, we don't have any information. And then, after a very long pause of a couple of months, we got one back from the National Archives at Kew, which is in London. Now, I can almost see the guy at the other end looking at this request with a big smile on his face going, do you know what? I'm not going to tell them anything, but I am. And this is what we got back. Now, you may or may not be able to read this. I hope you can read it. Don't know how the colours are going to come out transmitting it in this way. But anyway, it says, this is their exact words. We are unable to open this record because all the information is exempt. We cannot make the record open to you or to the public in general. Section 40 exempts personal information about a third party, someone other than the requester. Okay. Well, that means that the record definitely exists because they've got it. The subject had officially served notice that releasing it would cause them danger or distress. Oh, okay. So clearly it relates to this incident. The record contains the personal and the sensitive personal information of a number of identified individuals assumed to still be living. Okay, that means the story from the farmer of the crash recovery team is also confirmed as being true. So by not saying anything under Section 40, they actually told us, number 1, we have a record, number 2, the incident actually took place, and number 3, there are people still living who we can't release the details of because they were involved in the entire case, the cleanup operation. So thank you very much for that piece of information from the National Archives. That, unfortunately, is where that part of the investigation came to an end. Okay, next question. We didn't really get this tested properly back in the 1990s because it would have cost too much to do it back then. The technology wasn't available. So my publisher, Philip Mantle, got in contact with Gary and said, have you got any samples we can test? Now, Gary's kept this case very close to his chest all these years, and we didn't expect to get any kind of a response. But we got a very nice response because 3 days later, flying through his letterbox in a jiffy bag came 3 samples, which you're seeing on screen now, which then enabled us to continue the tests. Gary had approached British Aerospace back in the 1980s, 1990s, when the crash first occurred. And they'd looked at this material and they declared that it was probably aluminium, possibly a substance known as duralumin, which was in use from the First World War onwards. But that at that particular point in time, it was, excuse me, it was going to cost far too much to get them analysed. So one of the new samples went off to the Phenomenon Research Australia, and another one went off to MUFON Missouri Lab USA. And we didn't tell those two laboratories any information about the material, or that we'd sent them the samples off to another lab. So it was a blind test. Okay, so Australia, they had a jolly good look at this, and we didn't realize actually the two samples are different. One of the samples, one that went to America, has the hexagons on. The other sample is just painted green, or appears to be. So this is the painted green one that was in that packet. And when they sent it back, we were quite disappointed by the result, because yes, it came back as aluminium, and then also containing American cyanamide FM123 epoxy adhesive, which is a known substance. So they concluded that what they were looking at was more than likely man-made, probably in America, not like anything they'd ever seen before, and it's marketed nowadays as a substance called aluminium foam. What it does, it reacts with the hydrite and produces a very light, very strong aluminium metal that is solid at room temperature. So at this point, we're thinking, oh, well, that probably puts this whole thing to bed. It's on a part of the periodic table that is quite common. There's the contents, and it's probably nothing special. So anyway, 3 days later, we got the one back from Australia. Now, in this particular montage of images, the bottom right-hand image is going to look fuzzy. It's going to look out of focus, because that is a shot taken under a powerful electron microscope, and the metal bounced the frequencies back. So when they tried to do it using non-visual type of microscope, non-physical type of microscope, the metal pushed back and distorted the image. And that's what they ended up with. So already they were thinking this is a very odd type of metal. And sure enough, here it comes. Lanthanum, or lanthium, with many other things mixed into it, and not a match to any known form of standard chemistry. Also, no sign of any American glue. Now, what is interesting at this point, and really got the kind of alarm bells ringing, is that lanthanum is everywhere. It's in soil, it's in outer space, it's in the atmosphere, it's in meteorites, it's everywhere. It's literally common as muck, because it is basically in dirt. It's in everything. But that's a problem, because it costs an absolute fortune to extract lanthanum. And immediately we know that potentially there were 4 fields covered in more lanthanum in 1983 than human beings had ever extracted in the history of mankind. So that's a problem. And then it struck us, not only was lanthanum not available in 1983, but neither was aluminium foam. That didn't exist in 1983 either. So actually, what we've ended up with is something that technically should not exist. Okay, these are those other slightly more exotic substances, and you will see on the lanthanide series at the bottom, that's where lanthanum is. It's not something that has ever been used before. In inquiries that we've made subsequently, we've approached the military, we've approached quite a few people connected to vehicles, drones, planes that are currently in use, and not a single one of them has heard of lanthanumide being used in any military structure of any kind. So we're now in unknown territory. We were able, from the fragments and from the analysis, to reconstruct this. This is what we think was going on. It was probably a pressurized vehicle of some kind, not designed to resist low impacts, like, for example, trees, because trees is what it hit. The honeycomb foil element, we think, is the interior of the craft. The outside of it was probably the green painted surface, which, funnily enough, is actually, no, that'll be the inside of it, because the green paint is not an aerodynamic surface. That was what British Aerospace had said. It's made from aluminium foam, and then it's got this weird adhesive on it, which is known now as being used by the Americans, but wasn't known in 1983. And then on the outside of the craft, you've got, again, a similar kind of adhesive, but not analysed by the Australians. They didn't recognise, not analysed by the Americans, because they didn't recognise it as an American adhesive. So it maybe not. Then you got the lanthanum, which is the stuff that bounced the signals back to the microscope, and then you've got these green hexagons on the outside, which can be electrically conductive, as we've discovered. But actually, that outer coating speaks of something that can do stealth, that can appear and disappear whenever it wants to, because it's messing about with frequencies. All the metal fragments were described as curved, so we're going to assume that this thing, whatever it was curved on the outside. So you're basically looking there at a very primitive reconstruction of the shell of a UFO. That's basically what we've discovered thus far. But this is the real question. Is it one of ours? Is it something that came after the Second World War? Is it something we've developed, something we've been working on? Is it just some kind of secret device, some kind of secret flying machine that people in this country knew nothing of? But then there's always the possibility that it could be one of theirs, i.e. a proper alien vehicle of some kind, an alien craft made from materials that we, to a point, certainly to 83, we're not using. But then there's always the possibility that it's been back engineered, that it is in fact some form of hybrid technology that sits somewhere between alien and human. So I suppose what we need to do really is to get into what the definition of alien would truly be. What is it that we're looking at here? What on earth is going on? Let's get into part 3 then. Ideas. What are we dealing with? And from this debris that we have recovered, what can we deduce? Can we work out, for example, what type of technology is being used? Well, it's possible. It's possible. So let's start on that bending reality part of the talk. Well, what we do know is that all of the elements that we've got are available, and they have all come together to form something that physically crashed and hit trees in 1983. So certainly we have physical evidence that that particular vehicle actually existed. The other side of it, of course, is that if you can cover 4 fields with debris, it's going to be an unusual type of vehicle to then be able to fly off and not just crash into the ground, because there was no complete vehicle found on site. Is it coming from outer space? Is it coming from another planet? Well, the details of that image are probably going to be difficult to see. They're quite difficult to see even on a big screen. But what you're looking at there, the white ball in the center of the screen, is planet Earth, and all of those tiny little pinpricks of light, the pinpricks of light are objects that are held in the gravitational field of the planet. So that raises a problem. If you want to get in and out of the planet, you cannot physically fly through the lower and upper Van Allen belts, because you will get torn to shreds, basically. And that is an official scientific reconstruction of the current situation. There was about 26 million objects in orbit up to fairly recently, it's now estimated that as a result of breaking up satellites and other space shots and what have you, it's closer to 48 million. So that's significant, large size pieces of debris. So it's getting increasingly more difficult to fly around in near space, near Earth space. So it's unlikely that they are physically flying into the planet. The idea that you can do that you can fly around, has been questioned, because if, as in the past, they thought that outer space was a vacuum, then that would mean that our atmosphere would have to be in some form of container. Otherwise, all the atmosphere on planet Earth would just get sucked out into space, because that's what happens. It's more likely that we're living inside some kind of gigantic natural structure that keeps everything ticking along quite nicely, because space is certainly not empty. Okay, there's a lot of stuff out there. So, you know, even if you're flying through space in one of these craft, you're still doing something that is incredibly risky. Moving on slightly. Back to what I said at the beginning. You've got your fire, water, earth, and air, and you've got your ether. And everything that is working in this dimension that we happen to be in now works to something connected to those. You can do it mathematically, you can do it in terms of light, you can do it in terms of mathematics, you can do it in terms of wavelength. It's a well-established part of science. But as soon as you start looking into exactly what is involved in all this, you start to realize, as indeed Tesla did, I'm a bit of a fan of Tesla, you very quickly start to realize there's an awful lot more going on out there than we are aware of, because we're just not wired to pick most of it up. I mean, simple things like brain waves, they're basic frequencies, they're, you know, rattling around in our heads. Color is also frequency. Sound is frequency, hence the musical spiral. And we actually don't see a great deal of the frequencies that are out there, or experience a great deal of the frequencies that are out there, simply because we're not wired that way. When you actually look at something like this is the electromagnetic spectrum, where you're looking at wavelength and energy, and the basic thing that you need to know, really, to the non-scientist, is right in the middle of that chart, in the visible spectrum, is a band of light, which is made up of the colours that you find in the rainbow. You'll see it right in the very middle of that. However, that only forms about 0.3% of all wavelengths. So it does raise this enormous question: what on earth is going on in the rest of what we can't see? What's happening in the other wavelengths? Okay, there's a lot of empty space out there as well. Matter itself is made up of empty space. So there's plenty of space for things like this to happen. Okay. Everything in life is a vibration. Everything is constantly in motion. There's an invisible world out there, which, you know, you could say cats and dogs, dolphins, bats, whales, you name it. All these creatures that are working on different frequencies and different wavelengths can see things that we can't. It always amuses me when you get, you know, sort of 4 cats sat in a room and they're all staring at the same spot on the ceiling, and there's nothing there. But clearly they can all see something, but you can't. So the question is there enough science to support these strange vehicles appearing and disappearing, existing in their own little bubbles, moving at breakneck speed, breaking all the rules that we've known as physics, you know, breaking our normal existence? Well, yeah, of course there is. Of course these things can happen. Because everything, of course, is, as we've just discovered, frequency, sound and vibration. I like the Einstein quote on there: everything is energy and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy, it is physics. So yes, there's plenty of evidence that they could be bouncing around out there doing what they do. Of course, you've got quantum science, which has now completely turned ordinary science on its head. And that really sums it up as well for those of you who are looking for scientific basis for the more spiritual aspects of life. It's there. What we think we create, what we feel we attract, what we imagine we become. That's what happens. Death is just going from one frequency to another. It's very clear that we pass from here to somewhere else. And in some cases, there's quite a lot of stuff coming back the other way. So that, in a sense, over many hundreds, if not thousands of years, kind of proves in a physical way that what I'm saying is true. I'm sure a lot of listeners out there will have experienced the supernatural, which in actual fact may turn out to be natural. Okay. And then you get these sort of things. I put these on the end just as an additional thought. Down in the bottom right-hand corner there, that's a fossil ape called Gigantopithecus. Now, Gigantopithecus was huge. It was 10 foot tall, weighed around 1,100 pounds. It's a fossil creature. But what happens if that's Bigfoot? And what happens if Bigfoot has now become a ghost and it can pass back and through portals from one dimension to another? Okay, time is a similar problem because we see it as linear time, but then there are time slips, there are portals within time, there are things happening that we can't nail down. Okay, then you've got things like the scientist Masaru Emoto, who discovered that by being nice to some water that was freezing, you get one type of crystal, but by being nasty to it, you get a different kind of crystal. Does that mean that water itself, for example, is another dimension and is alive? It's elemental, remember, it's on the list of elements. Does that mean the entire earth that is made up primarily of water when it's not solid is in some way a different dimension? Because that would include us. We're 90% water. And then, of course, you've got things like plants. You know, we know that on a different wavelength and a different frequency, they scream when they get cut. They also react to us being nice and they react to us being nasty. But we don't get any of that. We are totally unaware that all that is going on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the greenery, in the green world around us. So what about time? Let's have a closer look at time, because that is, after all, the sea in which we all swim. Now, this is one of those rather handy 1970s toys they used to have in a lot of fun fairs. You drop coins in and the coin would spin round the outer surface of this thing. In fact, you could do two with this one. You could drop two coins in and they crisscross in different directions until they get faster and faster and faster and faster and spin faster until they drop into the void below. Possibly that in one way is a representation of how time for us as a race is working. The Earth cycle begins, and there's a range of various cataclysms which we know to be true. Then there's a range of various extinctions which we most definitely know to be true. Our species overall is decreasing. That's what the fossil record is telling us, till eventually you arrive at our time. Now the question is there an end? Does this spiral end, or do we drop into the next spiral and start again? It really got me thinking when I was doing the books that cover this subject, that time and what we know of what goes on might actually be the key to the UFO phenomena. I'm going to start with the species to prove a point. Here's a whole list of species, plus 13 others that I haven't listed, of human beings that are no longer with us. From the tiny little 3'6" Floriensis to the giants that we have in the Old Testament, to these guys who clearly all have different shaped heads to the heads we've got. Not all of these that you're seeing here have anything to do with human intervention. Most of them are genetically that way. They're born that way. These guys only went extinct about 400 to 500 years ago. So they've been around a long time. But the question is, if in the past we had a superior mental capacity, if they were all giant, enormous brains of the standard of Einstein, so you've got this huge wet computer wandering around, what would happen if they started to examine issues that we're examining, for example, like time and space? What would happen? What happens if we were superior in the past? Well, yes, I think, number one, we can accept that we were superior in the past. The idea of degeneration, chaos, decay, yeah, we see that all around us every day. So it's the reality. We do seem to be devolving rather than evolving. Maybe, possibly, in the past, these people managed to solve the problem of what made up the composition of the other side. Maybe they discovered how to manipulate time and space. That raises the possibility that what we're seeing, to bring it home, in terms of UFOs and UAPs, may not be aliens from another planet. They might not be from the future. They might actually be from the very distant past. What might be happening here is that there was a race of us in the very distant past, far superior to anything that's here today, who managed to crack the problem of time and space. There's a possibility that that's why they're coming to their own future, because you wouldn't create a paradox in doing that. It would also explain why they're abducting people and animals and biological samples, and why they're visiting things like nuclear bases and military installations and certain other locations around the world. They're here to find out where we've ended up. What has happened to this planet? Where are we? What are we doing? Which might be encouraging, because there is just a possibility that they might be here to help us with whatever comes next. All the things that were on that previous screen, all multidimensional, interdimensional, all of different frequencies, all of different kinds. So who knows exactly what we will discover in the months and years ahead. I'm just going to do my little advert here. If you want to get hold of any of the books that are covering this subject, you want some light to shine in the darkness so the darkness does not overcome it, which is a nice way to finish it, then dash out to Amazon, because all my books are available through Amazon. Just click on, order them. They make a great little read for Christmas. If I didn't do the advert, my publisher, Philip Mantle, would never forgive me. So there's the advert for his books at Flying Disc Press. Europe's Roswell covers the debris, and Crystal Skulls and Human Heads cover the species and the idea that perhaps we have in the past been time travelers. So thank you very much for watching. I've just got to dive back to my technology. Here we go. There we are. I'm back. Hopefully that worked.
That worked amazingly, Mark. Thank you so much for that presentation.
Thank you.
And I've never come across your work before. And I'm so glad I'm introduced to it now, because it's beautiful. And I truly love when researchers connect the dots on multiple levels. The simulation, what is this reality? What is the universe? What are the craft? And then taking it to the fact that we have had all these life forms on Earth. I see your breadth of research there, especially when it comes to ancient history and how that connects to everything as well. So beautifully done presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. We still have a little while, so I have some
Yeah.
questions. We can go deeper if you want. All right.
Oh, go on. I love
Let's
questions
do
and
it.
answers.
So, all right. What really stood out, one of the things was living in a gigantic natural structure, right? And something that I often wondered, even when I first woke up, was what's outside the universe? Because we all often think like outside one thing, there has to be something else, and what's outside that? So what are your thoughts around just that concept in general? If we're in this gigantic structure, are we part of something greater or that goes beyond that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, the short answer is yes. the question that I was asking is, what are the possibilities of us ever getting out there? You know, it encompasses things like Mars, the moon, you know, and all the conspiracies that go around that. But certainly from an ancient point of view, the idea of being able to exit the ball that we live inside is just an oxymoron. It's impossible. You know, from their point of view, you can't get out. And the more you examine that from a scientific basis, the more it's beginning to look like that's the case. I always quote the Salvatore Mundi, the Da Vinci picture where he's got a ball in one hand and he's kind of blessing the planet in the other. That ball is really interesting because the Christ figure, the creator, the God figure, is actually holding a hollow glass sphere that represents the planet. It's not a solid crystal ball, it's actually a hollow sphere. You can tell from the light refractions inside it, which kind of indicates Da Vinci had knowledge of this idea that we're inside a sphere. You know, that's what we're inside, and that sphere is the Van Allen belts. That scientific shot that I put up really graphically illustrates how, you know, you can't fire a spaceship through that. It'd be like sending a tin can through a million shotgun blasts. You know, you just couldn't do it. So I'm going to really stick my neck out and say it's not possible. But yes, we're part of a much bigger universe because space is absolutely not empty, categorically not empty. It's full of gas and, you know, debris and radiation, and, you know, our lack of knowledge of certain frequencies, I think, would mean we'd probably get microwaved the minute we got outside our atmosphere. You know, that's another problem. I don't think the sun is our friend once we leave that glass sphere, you know. So yeah, I hope that kind of answers the question.
It does. Well, it actually gives me more questions, to be honest.
Yeah.
So are you saying that the Earth is its own sphere that we can penetrate through, or in the Van Allen belt, that's outside the galaxy? I mean, outside the solar system, right? On the outskirts of the solar system. Are you saying that your belief is that the sphere is our whole solar system, or what is it exactly?
No, the Van Allen belts are the debris that's floating around the planet. So I think they're the outside of the sphere. There's the upper belt and the lower belt, and it contains everything. We're all trapped within that. That's the gravity that holds things to the planet. When I say we're part of something much bigger, I think we're just looking in the wrong direction. You can get a telescope and you can have a look and you can see what's out beyond the ball. You know, I'm not disputing anything to do with the galaxy or the universe or planets or anything else that's out there, because every now and again we get something whizzing in, you know, so clearly there's a lot of stuff going on out there. What I am saying is that possibly the way to deal with it is to look at the other frequencies and the other dimensions. That's the only way we're going to end up going to somewhere else, because in the physical realm, there's just too many obstacles. You know, I think that really we're looking in the wrong direction. You know, the idea of firing rockets out into space, you know, that's a NASA's technological dream. You know, that isn't going to work that way. Clearly, the people of the past, which is what I said in the presentation, have come up with this idea that their ships, their mode of transport and travel is based on frequency. It's based on a entirely different type of technology that functions differently from ours. I mean, Einstein and a few of the others said this, once you crack the problem of time, you go anywhere, you know, that's it. You know, it's science fiction now, but, you know, it'd be nice to see it as science fact in the 21st century.
Yeah. So do you think the moon is within that sphere as well? So have we gone to the moon, maybe not just beyond that?
Well, the thing with the moon is it's a bit of an odd one, because it's not a planet. It's a planetoid because it's stuck. It's glued to the outside of that atmosphere, and it's going round with the same face facing us all the time. So I have no problem at all accepting the fact that it's there, but I do have a problem accepting the fact that, you know, we can go 93 million miles and, you know, drop a spaceship on it. I think you'd come a cropper doing that. I think you'd just get torn to shreds. And I don't think we've completely got a handle on what the moon is yet. I don't think we really know, you know, what it's all about. It's doing things that particular sphere
100%.
that it shouldn't be doing, you know.
Yeah. I would say the moon is one of the biggest anomalies that's just looking us right in the face when you really look deep into all the different things that are just so weird about that structure.
Yeah, and without it, of course, everything falls apart.
Exactly.
You know, it's an integral part of the structure, you know, and when you start looking at structure, I mean, I'd encourage folks to go and do a bit of research about things like gravity and, you know, the way the whole planet's set up. The chances of things going wrong and the chances of things not happening the way that they've happened are millions to one, enormous. You know, there's no coincidence in the way that things are put together. So again, it's going all the way back to these ancient folks that clearly knew more than we did. You know,
Right.
they must have known how the planet was put together, you know, quite clearly. I'm thinking of all the ancient traditions around the world, you know, of beings, of creatures, of sentient things like us. You know, I mean, let's face it, these things, these aliens have got one head, two arms, two hands, two legs. They look like us. They behave like us. You know, something like that in the distant past seems to have put this place together. You know, seems to
Right.
have built it. And the more you dig, the more that evidence starts appearing. You know,
Yeah, I agree.
creator, yeah, I think there was a creator, no doubt
Yeah,
about it.
there was some sort of grand design when you look at it all.
Totally, totally.
So, all right, so if extraterrestrial life exists, interdimensional life in another place on the planet, but we can't leave past this sphere to get there. How do we travel and interact with these beings in our near future? And I
Well,
know you touched on frequency.
yeah, I would argue that it's almost happening the other way around. Um, in our case, I know this doesn't sit well with human beings, but I don't think we're the higher form. I think we're the lower form. I think some of those species that have been in the past were far better suited to, you know, operate on planet Earth than us. And I think one of those species, whichever one it was that cracked the problem of time and space, we don't have to go to them because I think we're now starting to look at evidence that they're coming to us. You know, they're quite definitely coming here, which I suppose is the thrust of this conference, is the fact that contact. You know, I think the guys from the distant past have made contact. I think that contact's, you know, already happened. Maybe at Roswell, maybe, you know, in Russia or China or even over here in the UK. Somebody somewhere knows exactly what's going on. And I've just got a feeling that we're sort of knocking on that door now. I think we're knocking on the door of disclosure. You
Yeah,
know, we need to appeal to these people and say, look, come on, be honest. You know, we're ready for it now. We've had Star Wars and Star Trek and all the rest of it. You know, tell us what's really going on. And
exactly. Yeah.
I think we'll be surprised. I think when we find out, we'll be quite surprised.
What's really happening. It's
Yeah.
interesting because a lot of the congressional members in disclosure and people around the world, and including mostly the mainstream, they're starting to think that these beings are visiting us from our future. But a lot of them are saying that they've been here for a long time. That's the number one narrative in congressional members. And the main reason for that is they're seeing more craft coming out of the oceans and from space. And they're not actually seeing the craft in space, they're seeing them in our atmosphere already.
Yes,
They
they're
don't
already
see them
here.
coming in. They're just seeing them. So it's almost like maybe they're going through some sort of portal technology, some sort of frequency shifting technology, or they're already here and they've been here for a long time, but they're coming from maybe some quantum realities, so they don't really need to come out from outside space.
Yeah, as I said, I think the solution, the answer is going to lie in the science. You know, doing the analysis on the metal that we did, we got quite a few surprises, as I showed you. And that is super science. That's what it is. It's beyond anything that we're messing with at the moment. Certainly the lanthanum, the lanthium that's miles beyond anything that we've got. So yes is the answer. Yes, I think back to the fire, water, earth, air, and spirit. I think that's what they're messing with. That's the building blocks that they're using, and they're applying different advanced forms of science to that. But I think the answer lies in time rather than space. I don't think we should be, you know, expecting to find Martians on Mars. I think you're more likely to find an ancient base at the bottom of the ocean, you know, than you are, you know, out in outer space. As you say, the evidence seems to be pointing to them already being here. So I'm quite a firm believer in that.
In regards to the metal that you spoke about, I missed how you acquired this metal. Could you explain that a little bit more? Like, where did you get it from?
Yeah, the guy that I mentioned, Gary Rowe, had a small team of crash recovery people go and visit the farm, and it had been cleared. But then Gary noticed that there was this damage to the copse where the thing had hit the trees, and he deduced that that's where you would expect to find debris that the military perhaps hadn't found, because clearly they hadn't cleared, you know, they'd not cleared it of trees or removed any of the bushes. And sure enough, when he dove in, I think they got 6 pieces of that material, which then, of course, went into the hands of the crash recovery team. You know, it went to Gary, and he's got it in private ownership. That's all we've got. You know, that's the sum total of it. But one of the pieces in particular is quite big. You know, it's a fair size. You know, it's just a little bit smaller than a computer screen, so it's quite a fair size piece. And that's lanthium. That's the lanthanum that we've got.
It seems like they've done a great job hiding the reversed engineered craft, or even, you know, even the fragments like you have, because I've heard so many stories about it. You know, we've worked with Linda Moulton Howe as well, and she spoke to people that have different types of artifacts in Roswell, in the museum. Supposedly they had one as well.
Yeah.
And I guess Bigelow Air Force Base in Vegas, that's where most of them are supposed to be, but we don't see them leaking out into the public. They seem to be doing a very good job of hiding this technology. You know,
Well,
you have any thoughts on that?
Well, as I said, they came knocking on Gary's door. He told me this fabulous story off camera. It's not in the documentary, of these 2 figures, black figures, turning up at his door, and he knew they were men in black before he even opened the door. And sure enough, they're there, black suit, passes, you know, a couple of SUVs with the number plates blacked out. And they did ask him for the material back. They said, "Can we have our metal back, our material back?" And Gary, thankfully, had scattered, I think there's about 100 key rings, these little key rings with little fragments of this material in, all over the UK. And he'd sent it to television producers, writers, press people, you know, all sorts of different people. And he just said to them, he said, "Look, I won't tell these people to release all this material unless you come back. If you come back, that's it. We'll just blow the lid on this thing." And they just literally walked off in silence. That was it. Got back in the cars, drove out of his street, and that was it. That was the end of it. That's the only reason, I think, because it's been kept quiet, that it survived this long. But the documentary we did in 2008, we expected that to really take off. You know, we thought that was going to be a big issue, and it died. It just died flat. We got no television off it. We got no interviews off it. We got no press off it. So it was killed. You know, that was silenced quite definitely.
So
This
where's
one,
the documentary now?
Oh,
I mean,
it's on YouTube. You can find it on
what's it
YouTube.
called?
Europe's Roswell.
Oh,
So
okay.
type my name in, Europe's Roswell, up it'll come. It doesn't say a lot different from what appears in the book, because, you know, we obviously had the same case to deal with, and the book is more updated, and it's physically exists. But I'd say watch the documentary as well. This particular incident went down the same rabbit hole as Roswell. You know, there's only one farmer, there's only one newspaper report about it, only one recovery team. All the debris got cleared away, you know, except for a small amount. Well, Matt Brazel hid, you know, a suitcase of debris somewhere. They know that. They've not found it yet, but it's out there. Well, we know where our debris is, but exactly the same set of, you know, cover-up events and everything happened again. They must have a little book, you know, on the shelf somewhere of what to do in the event of a UFO crash. Yeah, we'll have that one. Yeah. Oh, yes, we've done this before, you know.
Wow, yeah. You mean like the military industrial complex of Europe, right?
Yeah, they'll have a little green book on UFO crashes, you know, and
100%.
that's what they do, and it's identical. Everything to do with it's identical, which is why I think the freedom of information request from Q are not military. In this country, it's a civil, you know, depository for records. I think the little guy at Q was just having a bit of a laugh by telling us what he couldn't tell us.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Are you familiar with Clifford Stone at all?
Yes, I know. Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I did some events with him, and obviously, like you probably know that he was speaking in the circuit about being a part of a UFO crash retrieval team, right? And he was one of the few people. Not too many people came out with that, but now it's coming out even more. But I went and visited him with Paula Harris in Roswell, and we did some interviews there. And his whole place was just hundreds of documents printed out,
Yeah.
and he was categorizing them, going through it, because I guess you need to have been part of the specific programs to know the keywords to search through the hundreds of thousands of documents. And he compiled it, and he was telling me that the DoD or whatever in department he was working for had a manual, like you just said,
Yeah,
with the anatomy of 17 different extraterrestrial bodies in case they were found deceased or injured at any of these crash retrievals. And they had the schematics of specific UFOs that they've been finding quite often. So This backs up
Wow.
your story a little more there, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what we did with ours, for obvious reasons, we've kept it very low key, and we've kept the team as small as we possibly could, and we've been very specific in what we've done in terms of analysis and freedom of information, what have you. So basically, we're not running around sort of waving banners about this, but we are definitely out to tell the truth. We're here to present what we know and what we found. Which can't be a bad thing. I can't really see why military or anybody else would be upset in us showing something that exists. It's factual. It is there. Hence my appeal for them to come clean on this one. And tell us what it is we've got. Lanthium is the key. Lanthium is the kicker, because that's not anywhere else. Nobody else has ever mentioned that ever, and the military don't even seem to know about it either. They're not mentioning it. People connected to the military are not mentioning it. As soon as they go, oh well, it's a piece of a whatever bomber or drone or whatever. As soon as you go, so you make them out of lanthium, then and they're like, no. What do you mean? So I think.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think we've struck a chord with that one. I think that's really important, and it'll play a part in the future.
Right. So why do you think they are upset then? Like, and they don't want this disclosed? And maybe because we have a little while longer and we're going to skip some of the breaks. So we have like 10, 15 minutes if you're okay with that.
Yeah, okay.
I'd love for you to speak more about.
Yeah, I'm going to get comfy. Here we go.
Yeah, get comfy. Why they want, okay, well, in your opinion, why are they getting upset? Because you said you don't know why they're really getting that upset in regards to coming out with this information. And then maybe you can move into, why do you think now the governments are getting prepared to disclose? And it seems to be a war behind closed doors of certain people in the DoD military industrial complex that want to disclose and some people that don't. Maybe you can talk about what's going on with that, or what your opinion is. I think we just lost your sound, Mark. Maybe you moved it when you got comfortable.
Are we back?
There we go.
Okay. Are we still there? Good. I think what we're looking at is the good old, human beings' difference of opinion, which exists within the military. I think some members of the military would just like to, come clean, because if you're trying to do a cover up and you're trying to keep something secret, that's hard work. That is difficult to do. It's like when you tell a lie and you try and keep it going. It's not easy to do that. It's not the simplest route. But then I think there are others in the military, and fair dues. They're like, well, I'm not sure that the world is prepared to know what we know. And also, again, difference of opinion. It depends which military you're talking about, because obviously the Russians have got some of the information. The Chinese might have different information. The Americans might have different information again. We've clearly got different information over here. There's been some argument as to whether the material we've got is British or American, which might kind of explain why, nobody in Britain seems to know what it is or know anything about it. It could very well be American because of that glue substance that's there. But the question is, was that glue an alien technology engineered back? So now we know about it, but we didn't know about it then. Is it an alien invention that's patented as an American adhesive? Or did they get the test wrong? Or even worse than that, did the Australian lab try and cover it up? There's always that aspect that maybe the lab wasn't entirely prepared to stick its neck out and tell the truth there. Certainly the most reliable analysis is the American one. There's no doubt about that at all. That's the better of the analysis. So I think in the military, there's this question of do we or don't we? And in the military, it's not about majority. Even if the majority of people wanted it to come out, a secret is a secret is a secret. They don't have a democracy as such. It kind of goes up the pyramid until the guy at the top says, okay, fair enough, we can let them know, sort of thing. Maybe they are building towards some form of disclosure. But that material and the analysis and what's written in Europe's Roswell 40 years since impact, which is the book, I think that's as close as we've got to actually having proper information in the public domain, which is why I'm saying they should just tell us.
So as you've been doing this research on UFO crash retrievals and the metallic object, first I would love to know if you know about any certain technologies but I would like to first share that back in, I think, 2016, 2017, you know, when Tom DeLonge came out with To the Stars Academy on his Twitter, when Hillary Clinton was on Jimmy Kimmel, that was like the shift from UFOs to UAPs,
Yeah,
right? In that
yeah.
moment. Then the Sun newspaper came out in England and they were talking about Las Vegas and Bigelow's Air Force Base. And what they said in the small print right at the bottom was multiple technologies had been found are in Las Vegas, including the technology to slow down time, right? And to me, it was mind blowing. Like just that in itself says so much. And if we were to go deeper into it, what does that really mean? Who's using that technology? Are you aware of any kinds of technologies that have been discovered from these technologies that maybe have been discovered and shelved, or maybe technologies that have even been implemented into society over the last 70 years that could have been reverse engineered?
Hmm. Well, I've just written the foreword for a book called Weird Time, so I'll give that book a plug as well. It's not my own. I'm only sort of wrote the introduction to it, but it's still well worth a read. That it sort of deals with issues of accidental time anomalies and accidental time slips, but then it does leave you with this very strong impression that we're very close to understanding how to do things with time and how time works, how time operates. There's a lot of other issues as well. Since we had the pandemic 4 years ago, a lot of people seem to be noticing that time is speeding up. Now, that's something generally that seems quite odd. Whether it's natural or intentional, whether somebody somewhere is doing something with the planet and the way it operates, I'm not entirely sure. And then, of course, you've got to factor in things like CERN, who are looking at, other dimensions, other wavelengths, other frequencies. Are our experiments beginning to affect how time operates? Possibly, maybe that's the fact that these guys are appearing in these craft, the greys, etc. Maybe they're not coming necessarily to look at the atomic technology. Maybe at this point they're going to look at the time technology. Maybe we're getting perilously close to knowing what they know, if not actually knowing it. The press seem to be very strongly hinting that there are people out there that do have this technology. On a personal level, I've not handled it. I've not run across it. I've not, walked into a room and found one of these things. I have experienced a time slip. I did experience the loss of an hour on a journey, which I put into the book Weird Time. Whether that was to do with somebody else messing about with time and that was just the effect, I'm not really sure. So I am aware of the fact that time is more like the Einstein model. It's not linear. It goes in bends and twists, and sometimes we get to see the future, sometimes we get to see the past. It's not linear. The only problem we've got, I think, in a sense, is we just don't know how to control that, at this point. But somebody somewhere might, maybe that's what they don't want to tell us. Maybe that's why there's no disclosure.
Yeah. Yeah, we have operated within this very limited box of what we think is real. Time is linear, this is how it acts. We can only go fast as the speed of light. And all of those limitations has created it that people just accept what is given. And when we have different theories that can break free from the laws of physics, it's really hard for a lot of people to accept and adopt. But I feel that we're in a time right now where we're starting to quantify and prove that
Well,
time is not what we think it is.
on a very
Light isn't
basic
what we think it is.
on a very basic level, if we could mess about with time,
Yeah.
what would we do, and then what damage would that do?
Right. So maybe we have to be at a level of consciousness where we can be the stewards of time.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
it all comes
The
down to.
guys flying around in these machines clearly are custodians of their own
Yeah.
technology. Maybe it's not the military. Maybe it's them. Maybe they themselves are saying, no, the timing isn't right. You can't have it. You can't do this. Who knows? Clearly they're way beyond anything that we're used to interacting with. So I
Yeah.
would bow to the higher power.
hmm It's so interesting and beautiful. We have a lot of things that are going to be uncovered in our near
Mm,
future. You know, a lot of things to look forward to. And Mark, you're doing such a great job, brother. And I'm so glad that we're
thank you.
connected. I'll be reaching out to you too. I'd love to work with you some more in the future. And if you want, go ahead and plug your book one more time. Where can people find more information on you?
Okay, I'll do the usual advert. If you want to find any of the books, there are 9 books out in all. They're all on Amazon. Dead easy. Just put my name in, Mark Olly, and go see what comes up. If you want to see any of the past productions I've done or documentaries or anything like that, everything is on YouTube now. We put 18 years of back catalogue up, so it's all on YouTube. So the same thing applies. And if you want to contact me, I'm on Facebook. If you friend me and you're a real person, not one of these weird clone accounts, as long as you're a real person, you can get me on Messenger. So that's it. It's Amazon, YouTube, Facebook.
All right, beautiful. And Mark Olly on YouTube?
I am indeed. Yes,
Okay,
that's where you'll find me.
amazing. Mark, thank you so much, brother. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hope the
Take
conference
care.
goes well.
Thank you, brother.